Hello everyone. Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to talk a bit on O. Henry and his very famous short story, The Cactus, which you have got to study in your book, Appreciating Fiction. Now, O. Henry, to give you a very brief introduction on O. Henry, O. Henry, whose real name was William Sidney Porter, was one of the widely read American writers during the first decade of the 20th century. You guys might be familiar with the stories like the Gift of the Magi and The Last Leaf. Once we get to know the narrative method of O. Henry, we just wait for the unexpected, right? But unexpected but very clever and suitable endings. Now, your text as such, reading fiction, you have got a very detailed introduction to his life as a whole. He was born on September 11, 1862 in Greensboro, North Carolina. In 1882, due to some health issues, he shifted to Texas, where he felt that climatic conditions would relieve him of his disease. He was later a bank teller in Austin, and he also edited a short-lived humorous weekly called Rolling Stone, and he also wrote a daily column filled mostly with humorous anecdotes for a Houston newspaper. Now, he was indicted for alleged embezzlement of funds from the bank that he was working that employed him. He maintained his innocence, but he fled to Honduras instead of standing a trial. Now, on his return from Honduras, he was convicted, and during this 3-year imprisonment in Ohio, he began to write and sell stories to the magazines. Now, from the prison, he began to write stories about Westerners, about Southerners, about Latin Americans. New York was the flavor which caught him the most. He wrote about New York's, the city's splendor, or the city's colorful and varied aspects. When he was in prison, he did attempt to write under different pseudonyms. He attempted different pseudonyms, but once he came out of the prison, he had become O. Henry. That was the pseudonym that he himself gave him. Now, his first book, Cabbages and the Kings, appeared in 1904. His other collections of short stories are The 4 Million, which was published in the year 1909, Options, 1909, Roads of Destiny, 1909, The Trimmed Lamp, 1910, Sixes and Sevens, 1911, The Gentle Crafter, 1919, etc. These, and you might be familiar with this very famous twisted ending of O. Henry, which he is very familiar of. That is how it is called. It is called O. Henry twist. Now, let's look at the story. This particular story, you have it is the story of Trisdale and his nameless beloved. You do not have name given to the beloved. We have 3 characters in the story: Trisdale, his beloved, and her brother, who is of course a friend of Trisdale. At the very beginning itself, Henry begins the story in quite a philosophic way. He talks about time being relative. Somebody has said that you get a reminiscence of your whole life just before the time of your death, or just before the moment you die, or the moment you are dying. Of course, you are moving from this world to another world. You live your whole life again. You see it all moments in a fraction of seconds, in a fraction of moments. You have the whole life that you have spent just there right before your eyes. So in that sense, we can say that time is of course relative. Now, Henry begins saying that a drowning man would have the reminiscence of his whole life. The moment before he dies, he lives again all the moments that he has lived. Now, and of course, you could review your courtship, your love affair between you and your beloved while removing while removing one's gloves. It's the moment the removing your gloves is just it takes only a fraction of seconds, but then you could of course review, or you could take in, you could have your whole of the courtship right before your eyes when you're removing your gloves. Now removing the gloves could of course symbolize removing of all the past that he has carried within him, and he would of course gloves, when you remove your gloves, of course you are taking away all your past that is there, but then gloves had always given you the warmth, the care, the soothe, the comfort that would be, see, when you are in gloves, you suppose you are inside your blanket, the feeling that you get, the comfort that you get, you take away the blanket, you are coming back to, I mean you are entering a new life, that is there, but then the warmth or the comfort of that past, the gloves, the worn condition, the gloved condition would give you, that would be lost forever. So he is removing, Trisdale is removing his gloves, and while he is removing his gloves, he is thinking about that life which has made him remove these gloves, I mean which has ultimately made him remove the gloves. He had to switch himself to another life, or he has to remove the gloves that he once had, he had to leave the past that he had, and he is trying to give a detailed picture of what had happened that he had to remove the gloves, what had happened that he had to forget the past altogether, what had happened that he had to leave the cozy, the comfortable, the soothy sort of a life that he once had, the gloved in life that he once, see, gloved in life does have love associated with it, right? You are inside the blanket, you feel so loved, you feel so cuddled, right? So that is lost for him forever. Now he is detailing what made him leave his past forever. Now when we are talking about the atmosphere of this story, the atmosphere of the whole story is very much melancholic. It is a bachelor apartment. Trisdale is standing by a table on which you have a cactus and in a red earthen planter. See, we'll talk about this cactus later on. See, you have the title itself given, cactus. Trisdale, now for now we'll just talk. I'll just give you details of the story about the cactus. We'll talk later on. Okay. Now Trisdale is drinking with his friend. His friend is of course the brother of the bride, and the bride was his lover once, was his beloved once. Now his senses, his ears, his eyes, his everything, his senses, of course, is listening to the chanting of the priest's voice, the words that the priest is uttering. It's quite scary for him. He is scared, or whenever he thinks about the flowers inside the church, the voice of the priest it's ringing in his ears. It recurs in his ears. The words of the minister, the words of the priest binding her, that is his ex-beloved, and her husband. It was this particular moment when all of his senses were focused on that particular moment of the priest chanting, she getting binded to her husband, that he was thinking back on his life. He was trying to go back to his past and think and try to decipher what had happened between them, that he lost her forever. What made him lose her? Now he saw all the garbs of pretense and egoism. I'm quoting, he saw all the garbs of pretense and egoism that he had worn turned to rags of folly. Now vanity and conceit has always been the joints in his armor. He was a man, now Trisdale was a man who was so very proud of himself and his achievements. He of course did have so much of talents and all, but then he was equally proud of those talents, and he boasted, kind of, it's not boasting of course, yeah, kind of, he was so very proud, excessively proud actually. Now he regrets that that fact, that maybe the garments that he did wear, vanity and conceit, the garments that he did wear, might have been appeared sorry for others, threadbare for others. I mean, even at this moment when she got binded to another person altogether, he just wanted to think, or he just wanted to, the only thing that he wanted to think was she would be bothered about Trisdale even this time. But then when Trisdale looked at her and the way that she was looking at the person she was going to marry, it reminded him that, it told him that, it conveyed him that she had forgotten him completely. And he couldn't understand why this relationship was broken or what happened between them, because there was not even a difference of opinion between them. So there was not even a single quarrel between them. So now what happens is he's trying to go back to the past, and he's trying to recollect those moments, the last moments that he had been with her. Now O. Henry is describing the relationship between the two, and we are going back to the past. Now here you have a description of a typical woman, a lady a lady who loves her lover so much that, I mean, Trisdale, here Trisdale is the lover, and here is the lady who is nameless, of course, as I told you, she is nameless. Probably O. Henry wanted to describe her as a person who does not have an agency of her own, who does not have a desire of her own, an opinion of her own. Now here is a typical, kind of a stereotypical lady who loves her lover so much that she even reveres him, worships him like you worship a god. She reveres him, admires him all the time. She has always placed this person, Trisdale, on the pedestal, worshipping him in the real sense, worshipping him, taking as gospel truths whatever comes from his mouth, whatever words he utters, the actions that he does. All these things were taken for granted or taken as gospel truth. She never dared to question. She did not even have any difference of opinion for that matter. She revered him so much, and she loved his expertise in many things. See, of course, he was a man who was talented much. He was an expert in lots and lots of things, and she loved his expertise in all these things, and this love for his expertise made her love him much more. Now what did he do? So here was a woman, as I told you, who lacked all sorts of agency, who did not, maybe because love was making her do this, or because she loved him so much, she did not feel that she had a difference of opinion, or she did not feel that there are certain things that you do not love in a person, right? Now she loved everything in him as that was, he was the center of her life. Now what did he do? He, on the other hand, enjoyed all the homage, right? All these homages that was bestowed on him. He accepted all the admiration and worship with a sort of a royal grandeur. He was so proud of himself, and he enjoyed her childlike worship, like a blind worship that she had. He was enjoying that. She had always attributed to him a kind of a supernatural aura with lots of excellencies, lots of talents, which he did not even try to doubt or question. See, whenever he said that, yeah, you're great, he said, yeah, I'm great, I'm such and such, I'm so great, kind of thing. She said that, yeah, when she used to say, like, you do have this talent and you're really superb, and he said, yeah, of course I do have that, and he was accepting everything, he was absorbing everything, and he did not even return anything. He did not even try to appreciate her in anything, right? He didn't, whatever she gave him, he was like absorbing. It's like absorb the oblation as a desert drinks the rain that can coax from it no promise of blossom or fruit. Now what happens is, he did not give her anything in return. He was like a desert who did take in all the rain but did not return anything, any sort of fruit or any sort of flower. Now Trisdale was thinking of that last night when he puts forward the proposal of sharing his pedestal with her, in the sense that he wanted her to share his pedestal with him. And that moment, that night, he was so charmed by her beauty, and he was trying to propose to her. And that time you have the focus on her beauty, the careless waves of her hair, the tenderness and virginal charm of her looks and her words. It was during this particular conversation that she just mentioned a name, somebody named Captain Carruthers, telling her that Trisdale speaks Spanish like a native. Now for Carruthers, Trisdale knows that Carruthers was a sort of an idiot who had mistaken his quoting a proverb in Spanish, which Trisdale has got from the back of a dictionary. Trisdale had this tendency to do this kinds of things often, probably because of his vanity and conceit. He wanted to show off his knowledge perhaps. Now when she asked, now she asked whether there is anything that he did not know, in the sense she was so surprised or so happy and so proud of his knowledge in Spanish that she asked, is there anything that you do not know? You know everything. And she revered that knowledge that he had. She was so proud of all the capabilities, all the accomplishments that he had, and worshipped him for that. And what did he do now? Her admiration was so soothing for him, so flattering, this sort of a thing that he felt like, let it be, let her think so. He did not even tell her that, no, you're wrong, I do not know Spanish, it is just that I happen to get some word in Spanish from the back of a dictionary, as a result of which I just used that word, I just used that word somewhere, and this person Carruthers had mistaken. He did not say that. He did not say that he did not know Spanish at all. He did not say that he did not even know a single sentence in Spanish. He did not deny the incident. See, he did not, that was because you are so very admired, so very flattered, that you just enjoy that flattery. Now he allowed her to go on admiring him on his Spanish scholarship. Afterwards what happened was that she was going on admiring him on his Spanish scholarship. Now this could be taken, see, cactus, when you see cactus you have thorns on it, right? Now what happens is, this was a thorn, this was kind of thorn once what happens is, when a thorn pricks you, you would get a chance to take it off, right? You would get a chance, a moment to take it off. This was a moment that he could have taken that small thorn, which would later on, if you are not taking that thorn at the right moment, if you are not nipping the thorn at the very bud itself, what happens is, it just remain there. It would later on pierce you and would bleed throughout your life. Now what happens is, he does not take that thorn out. Though she did accept the proposal, as I told you, he had gone to propose her, or that was the proposal day, and he did propose to her, and she did accept the proposal. There was a coy consent in her eyes, but then she told that there was a consent that you see, and it was quite visible in her eyes. But then she told that I'll reply tomorrow. I'll give you an answer tomorrow. And now that tomorrow came, he was waiting for that answer. The next day, he was so very eager to get the answer that she would be accepting the proposal and all. But she did not come. Somebody else came with a cactus as a present from her. She had actually sent a gift in the form of a cactus, which carried a strange botanical name perhaps. Reply did not come, she did not come. It is just this cactus with that strange name that came. He waited all night, but then, as I told you before, his vanity did not let him go and find her. If reply does not come, you could go and ask, right? But his vanity did not let him go and find her, did not let him bow before her. He just waited and waited, and after 2 days they met at a dinner. He was of course still expecting the reply, but she was looking at him with that same admiration, with that same admiring, breathless wonder. She did not say anything, he did not say anything. That was it. They drifted apart, saying nothing. Now nothing happened between them, right? He proposed. She had that reply so visible in her eyes, the consent was so visible in her eyes, but then she did not send the answer except for a cactus with a strange name. Now this was the parting episode that he was thinking when his friend called him. See, the moment, the last moment, the proposal day, he did not get a reply, and he was quite bewildered about what had happened. He was quite confused. He did not know what drifted him apart, what separated them. It was at this moment that his friend, that is of course the bride's brother, his ex-beloved's brother, asked him why he was so unhappy. And this brother was talking about his sister getting married and the brandy that they think that the brother or friend would drink, and kind of brandy talks and all, that his friend noticed the cactus on his table. Now the cactus, as I told you, it was his bachelor apartment, Trisdale's apartment. So he noticed this cactus on the table, and the friend just wondered from where he got the cactus. He asked Trisdale where he got the cactus, and Trisdale in a very casual way replied that of course it is a gift from a friend, and asked him whether he knew the species. Now comes the climax of the story when the friend tells him that the name on the cactus is a Spanish name, Vento Mame, which in English means come and take me. So this is the climax of the story, where the friend tells him that the name of the cactus is Vento Mame, that is a Spanish name, and in English it means come and take me. Now this is the story. This person is quite well versed in Spanish as far as his beloved is concerned. And Vento Mame, if you give a gift of a cactus with the name Vento Mame on it, come and take me, obviously any person who is who has the knowledge of Spanish would understand the meaning, right? Now this is the whole story, and that is the climax of the story. Now let's move on to the title of the story. Cactus, to give you the definition or to give you what cactus plant is. Cactus is a plant which you usually see in a desert. It is a succulent. I hope you are familiar with that. It is a succulent. Cactus on the one hand is a thorny plant, right, which has the quality of bleeding. It has the quality of repulsion. See, you don't want to touch a cactus, because once you touch a cactus, its thorns would pierce you and you will get hurt, you will bleed. Cactus, that is the one side of cactus, it will bleed you. On the other hand, cactus is the symbol of perseverance, right? A plant which could bear any odd circumstances, any odd climatic conditions. It sustains under all climatic conditions. Now, as Sachidanandan in his poem Cactus, the poem which is titled Cactus, says, cactus exists without anyone to woo it, without tempting butterflies, without birds to sing. Thorns are the language of cactus. Now, it announces its existence with a bleeding touch. Now, here in the story, cactus is the language. The thorns of the cactus becomes the means by which the lady love announces her consent. Now you have different varieties of cactus. Vento marme is a variety of cactus which has long tentacular leaves that perpetually swayed with slightest breeze. Now this cactus, this kind of cactus, Vento marme, invites you, beckons you, and that is why it is named as Vento marme, which means come and take me. Now the vanity and the conceit, you can of course a cactus, as I told you, you could equate the lady as the cactus who had all the perseverance to tolerate him in any odd climatic conditions. She, bereft of all her agency, could accept him in all his varieties, in the sense with all, I mean, with a sort of a full love. She was able to accept him in all his moods. She was able to accept him, but then she did have thorns, in the sense once it reaches its limit, it too would pierce you and bleed you. And you could of course take Truesdale's vanity and conceit as the cactus which was growing within himself. See, it was because of this vanity and conceit that was there, growing as a cactus, growing on and on with thorns in him, which did pierce him at the end of it, and which is going to bleed him till the end of his life. And now this particular story is told in the third person limited narrative. Third person limited narrative is a form of storytelling where the narrator gets to know what happens in the mind of one character, not all the characters, in the mind of one character. If you get to know the mind of all the characters, it is called third person omniscient narrative, but here it is third person limited narrative. So here Henry gets to know what happens inside the mind of Truesdale, though we do have other two characters, the beloved and her brother. So the story is narrated in a way where Truesdale's mind is laid bare to the readers. Talking about the characters, you have Truesdale as a man who enjoys all the privilege of being a male. Now the woman character represented in the story is nameless, bereft of all agency, stereotypically feminine, who enjoys putting her male counterpart on the pedestal instead of giving him an equal human position. She attaches a godly image to her lover, an all-knowing image, which ultimately lets her misunderstand him and thus lose him forever. Truesdale, on the other hand, you can see him as a person who enjoys the position that is given to him. He enjoys getting flattered, especially when it is done by somebody you love the most. Now, Truesdale is not true to her. Because he wanted to maintain his privileged position, his high position, his pedestalized position, and does not want her to see him in a low position. He is a person who is filled with vanity, filled with pride, excessive pride actually, that he was not even ready to inquire what happened to her or why she did not give a reply. It is his vanity and his conceit which of course resulted in this tragedy. If you are going for a lesson, for a morality in this particular story, it teaches you to be honest enough, sincere enough, try not to be what you are not. Now, talking about O. Henry as a writer, O. Henry, as I told you, is a writer with a beautiful ending, with a surprising sort of an ending, but a very clever and witty ending. He is a writer who presents a very unpredictable ending to almost all of his stories. It's like you read in a very normal pace, you just move on reading and you feel like there is nothing to happen, nothing is going to happen. I don't know what is going to happen at the end, and all of a sudden there is an end which quite startles us, which is a sort of an ending which is quite unpredictable. Now, O. Henry has successfully incorporated the features of the use of a symbol, the symbol of cactus, similes and metaphors, the irony, the use of wit, wordplay, the clever and twisted endings, etc., to provide a sort of an organic structure to this particular story. Thank you.